children. Today we are going to read chapter 14 of Stuart Little. We are almost done with our chapter book, and it's so exciting because on the last chapter we read how he's about to meet Harriet, that little tiny girl that is just his height, and we do not know if he's gonna like her. They are gonna become friends. Are they gonna fall in love? Or is he gonna forget about Margalo? Oh, it is so exciting. Let's start reading and find out what happens with Stuart on this chapter. So, chapter 14, an evening on the river. When Stuart arrived at his campsite by the river, he was tired and hot. He put the canoe in the water and was sorry to see that it leaked badly. Oh no, remember he asked to make sure that it was not leaking? The birch bark at the stern was held together by a lacing, and the water came in through the seam. In a very few seconds, the canoe was half full of water. Darn it, said Stuart. I've been swindled. That's tricked. He had paid 76 cents for a genuine Indian birch bark canoe, only to find that it leaked. Darn, he muttered. Then he bailed out his canoe and hauled it up on the beach for repairs. He knew he couldn't take Harriet out in a leaky boat. She wouldn't like it. Tired though he was, he climbed a spruce tree and found some spruce gum. With these, he plunged the seam and stopped the leak. Even so, the canoe turned out to be a cranky little craft. If Stuart had not only plenty of experience on the water, he would have got into serious trouble with it. It was a tippy boat, even for a souvenir. Stuart carried stones from the beach down onto the water's edge and ballasted the canoe with the stones on it until it floated evenly and steadily. That means that he put rocks to balance it so that it would be stable. He made a backrest so that Harriet would be able to lean back and trail her fingers in the water if she wished. He also made a pillow by tying one of his clean handkerchiefs around some moss. Then he went for a paddle to practice his stroke. He was angry that he didn't have anything better than a paper spoon for a paddle, but he decided that there was nothing he could do about it. He wondered whether Harriet would notice that his paddle was really just an ice cream spoon. My phone is falling. All that afternoon, Stuart worked on the canoe, adjusting ballast, the rocks, filling seams, and getting everything shipshape for tomorrow. He could think of nothing else but his date with Harriet. Did you hear that? Date? A date with Harriet? Oh dear, this is turning into something serious. At supper time, he took his axe and felled a dandelion, little flower. He opened a can of deviled ham and had a light supper of ham and dandelion milk. After supper, he propped himself up against a fern, bit off some spruce gum for a chew, and lay there on the bank dreaming and chewing gum. In his imagination, he went over every detail of tomorrow's trip with Harriet. He's imagining the whole thing. With his eyes shut, he seemed to see the whole occasion plainly. How she would look when she came down the path to the water, how calm and peaceful the river was going to be in the twilight, how graceful the canoe would seem drawn up on the shore. In imagination, he lived every minute of their evening together. They would paddle to a large water lily pad upstream, and he would invite Harriet to step out on the pad and sit a while. Stuart planned to wear his swimming trunks under his clothes so that he could dive off the lily pad into the cool stream. He would swim the crawl stroke, and up and down, and all around the lily pad, while Harriet watched him, admiring his ability as a swimmer. Stuart chewed the spruce gum very rapidly as he thought about this part of the episode. I think he's getting too excited about that part where Harriet just admires and loves how he can swim so well. Suddenly, Stuart opened his eyes and sat up. He thought about the letter he had sent, and he wondered whether it had been delivered. It was an unusually small letter, of course, and might have gone unnoticed in the letterbox. This idea filled him with fears and worries. But soon he let his thoughts return to the river. As he lay there, a whippoorwill began to sing on the opposite shore. That's a little bird. Darkness spread over the land, and Stuart dropped off to sleep. The next day dawned cloudy. Oh no, that's how the day began, cloudy. Stuart had to go up to the village to have the oil changed in his car, so he hid the canoe under some leaves. He tied it firmly to a stone and went off on his errand, still thinking about Harriet and wishing it were a nicer day. The sky looked rainy. Stuart returned from the village with a headache, but he hoped that it would be better before 5 o'clock. He felt rather nervous, as he had never taken a girl canoeing before. He spent the afternoon lying around camp, trying on different shirts to see which looked best on him, and combing his whiskers. He would no sooner get a clean shirt on than he would discover that it was wet under the arms from nervous perspiration. And he would have to change it for a dry one. He's sweating from the excitement. Or is it because he's anxious, nervous, in love? I wonder. He put on a clean shirt at 2 o'clock, another one at 3 o'clock, and another one at 4:15. This took up most of the afternoon. As 5 o'clock drew near, Stuart grew more and more nervous. He kept looking at his watch, glancing up the path, combing his hair, talking to himself, and fidgeting. The day had turned chilly, and Stuart was almost sure that there was going to be rain. Is the day going to be ruined? Are they going to be able to go out? He couldn't imagine what he would do if it should rain, just as Harriet Ames showed up to go canoeing. What is he going to do? At last, 5 o'clock arrived. Stuart heard someone coming down the path. It was Harriet. She had accepted his invitation. Stuart threw himself down against a stump and tried to strike an easy attitude, as though he were accustomed to taking girls out all the time. He waited till Harriet was within a few feet of him, then got up. Hello there, he said, trying to keep his voice from trembling. Are you Mr. Little? Asked Harriet. Yes, Stuart. It's nice of you to come. Well, it was very good of you to ask me, replied Harriet. She was wearing a white sweater, a tweed skirt, short white wool socks, and sneakers. That's a lot of wool. Her hair was tied with a bright color handkerchief. And Stuart noticed that she was carrying a box of peppermints in her hand, like this. Oh, not at all. Glad to do it, said Stuart. I only wish we had better weather. Looks rather sticky, don't you think? Stuart was trying to make his voice sound as though he had like a different accent. Harriet looked at the sky and nodded. Oh well, she said. If it rains, it rains. Oh, sure, repeated Stuart. If it rains, it rains. My canoe is a short distance up the shore. May I help you over the rough places in the path? Stuart was a courteous mouse by nature, but Harriet said she didn't need any help. She was an active girl and not at all inclined to stumble or fall. Stuart led the way to where he had hidden the canoe, and Harriet followed behind. But when they reached the spot, Stuart was horrified to discover that the canoe was not there. It had completely disappeared. So, what do you think? Do you think someone took it? If this was your story, who would you say took the canoe? A frog? Another animal? Someone stepped on it? If this was your story, what would you write? I wonder. Stuart's heart sank. He felt like crying, but he couldn't. The canoe is gone, he groaned. Then he began racing wildly up and down the bank, looking everywhere. Harriet joined in the search, and after a while they found the canoe, but it was a complete mess. Someone had been playing with it. A long piece of heavy string was tied to one end. The ballast rocks, the rocks that made it stable, were gone. The pillow was gone. The backrest was gone. The spruce gun had come out of the seam. Mud was all over everything, and one of the paddles was all bent and twisted. It was just a mess. It looked just the way a birch bark canoe looks after some big boys are finished playing with it. So it was some big boys that played with it. I wonder if you thought of that too. Stuart was heartbroken. He did not know what to do. He sat down on a twig and buried his head in his hands. Oh, gee, he kept saying. Oh, gee whiz. Is he going to cry? What's the trouble? Asked Harriet. Miss Ames, said Stuart in a trembling voice. I assure you I had everything beautifully arranged. Everything. And now look. Harriet was for fixing the canoe up and going out on the river anyway, but Stuart couldn't stand that idea. It's no use, he said bitterly. It wouldn't be the same. The same as what? Asked Harriet. The same as the way it was going to be when I was thinking about it yesterday. I'm afraid a woman can't understand these things. Look at that string. It's tied on so tight I could never get it off. Well, suggested Harriet, couldn't we just let it hang over in the water and trail along after us? Stuart looked at her in despair. Did you ever see an Indian paddling along some quiet, unspoiled river with a great piece of rope dragging astern? He asked, like you pull a boat and you walk beside it. It's like he was very upset about it. Well, we could pretend we were fishing, said Harriet, who didn't realize that some people are fuzzy about boats. I don't want to pretend I'm fishing, cried Stuart desperately. Besides, look at that mud. Look at it. Look! He was screaming now. Harriet sat down on the twig beside Stuart. She offered him a peppermint, but he shook his head. Well, she said, it's starting to rain now, and I guess I better be running along if you are not going to take me paddling in your canoe. I don't see why you have to sit here and sulk. Would you like to come up to my house? Do you think Stuart is going to say yes or no? Well, I think you're right. Stuart is so upset and so bothered that he's going to say no. After dinner, you could take me to the dance at the country club. It might cheer you up. Harriet is even inviting him to another place. What do you think Stuart is going to say? No, thank you, replied Stuart. I don't know how to dance. Besides, I plan to make an early start in the morning. I'll probably be on the road at daybreak. Are you going to sleep out in all this rain? Asked Harriet. Certainly, said Stuart. I'll crawl in under the canoe. Harriet shrugged her shoulders. Well, she said, goodbye, Mr. Little. Goodbye, Miss Ames, said Stuart. I am sorry our evening on the river had to end like this. So am I, said Harriet, and she walked away along the wet path toward Tracy's Lane, leaving Stuart alone with his broken dreams and his damaged canoe. So, this is the end of chapter 14. Did you expect that to happen? At the beginning of the chapter, I thought, by the way Stuart was talking and daydreaming about Harriet, I really thought that they were just going to fall in love and Stuart was going to forget all about Margalo. But by now, I can tell he's moving on and he might not even become friends with Harriet after all, like some of you predicted. So, one more chapter to go. Are you excited? I am very excited. Last chapter coming up. See you all. Bye-bye.